In Ghana, people either purchase homes from real estate developers or buy a plot of land to build a home. Which of these two options is preferable? Join me and my guests, a former president of the Institute of Architects, Osei Kwame Ajimai, and Augustus Richardson, Honorary Secretary of the Institute of Architects, as we sit on the beautiful lawn of the Labadi Beach Hotel to explore the issue of should you buy it or build it? But first, my colleague Michaela Richtanai has been speaking to some prospective homeowners on their preference.
Maybe you've been renting for years and have decided it is time for home ownership. Would you want to buy or build your own home? And what are the processes you have to go through? For most Ghanaians, they'll rather build than buy.
I think I would love to build my own house because there are so many qualities I would like to add to my house.
I prefer to build my own house because somebody doing his business, building a house, how sure are you of the materials the person used to build the building? Because, for instance, we hear nowadays people building are corruption and other things just because the materials are not good.
It's a wish to every youth to have access to his own home, but the possibility in Ghana is not there. So I wish to build my own house in the future.
But there are those who think buying a home is the best decision to avoid the hassle they have to go through to secure land.
It had been my dream that I buy my own home rather than build.
Why?
There are too many litigation over land. I'm not prepared to go through that. The things that people would want to do to you over a piece of land, you might not have that capacity to do same to them. So why wouldn't somebody solve that problem? I pay the money and then I get my house.
So for conveniency, it's good to buy because in that aspect, you don't have any problem with landlord or any other person coming owning the house or whatever it is.
Well, worry no more because your one-stop shop for all your housing needs. JoyNews Western World Properties Habitat Fair is starting tomorrow. But for now, join Mama V and her guest as they proffer some solutions on the processes to owning a home and the advantages and disadvantages of buying or building.
Why is it important that I have this conversation, first of all, with architect? What do you guys do?
What do we do? Architects basically are critical practitioners in any space. I like to broaden beyond your house to space, you know. And as we sit here, there's a whole lot of quality stuff that you see around that has been put together primarily by architects. So architects respond to needs of humanity. And so you modulate what you normally would call greenfield, bare space, into people's aspirations. It can be extremely complex, but at the end of the day, you move from ideas into a product, okay, which is basically what we're seeing right here. And architects often than not take the lead in the design, in modulating that space to achieve what it is that you want. So many things go into it, you know, to make sure that the aspirations are exactly what it is that you answer to. But sometimes the aspirations are not just personal because whatever you do is situated into some environment or some context. So it could be a cultural context, it could be an environmental context, it could be a social context, it could be political, civic, anything, you know. So your determinants in arriving at the end product is also extremely critical. And I'm sure you'd realize that even for this facility, to maintain the environment that they had here, they've had to leave a lot of the trees, the coconut trees that they met, okay? And I'm sure it's part of one of the design considerations in arriving at that. So basically that's what architects do, you know, to move issues from an ideal situation into a structured situation.
I want to come to you, Architect Richardson. Do we make use of architects in Ghana, do you think? I know that you work on huge projects, but as ordinary citizens, do we make use of architects?
Yes, I think that maybe not as much as we would wish, but yes, we do make use of architects. Historically, we have always made use of architects in sort of structuring our civic places, the Independence Square, the stadium. Those large civic buildings are all done by architects. But I guess the question you're asking also deals with just the man on the street. Yes, we make use of architects. In all the buildings that you see, the homes that come up, the real estate developers will go, their first point of call will be to architects to aid them to solve a problem. And that comes back to that definition that architect Osekwa Najiman was talking about, that we try to resolve problems for people. So there are a lot of people who come to architects to try and resolve a problem, to think through a problem with them, and which becomes a manifestation of space. So yes, I think we do use them, maybe on the larger scale, especially because of poverty. And when you think about the stresses of globalization, the movement of people from rural communities into urban communities, those people may not find, because of maybe the fact that even what they are building as kiosks or makeshift structures are really very, cheap and not sustainable. And so they are not able to afford maybe the services or the values of architects. So yes, I think generally we use them, and architects are used in this country for all walks of creations.
Let me just say that we're having this conversation. It's almost like a countdown to the Habitat Fair 2018. We have the first clinic coming up at the Achimota Mall. It's from Saturday to Sunday. It's 2 days just for you to explore and see what's available on the market. But this conversation that we're having in terms of, should I buy an already made house or I should go and get a plot and develop? Why is it important that I have that conversation with an architect?
Let me, try and foray into, answering this question. You really have, in Ghana, people have maybe two options, which is what you've mentioned. To either buy from somebody who's already, created a product in a maybe most likely a gated community, and then you go and look at it and then you purchase. Let me use that scenario. You need, unfortunately, it doesn't happen as often, but you will need to, even when you go there, go with your architect or somebody you've selected.
The already made house?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll explain why. Not to mention any names of people who've had hellish experiences with some of these.
I can relate.
You can, absolutely. People buy real estate buildings and find out that, after buying, the plumbing is not working well. They find out that the electricals are not working well. I've heard horror stories of ceilings falling on people. It's important. Yes, absolutely. You'll be living in the house, the tiles just start popping up, and these are experiences people have. There are cracks in the floor. When you are going to purchase these houses, it's important to go with your architect, because you don't have the knowledge, and you really don't know what you are going there to look for. So when you go with a trained eye and somebody who knows what to look out for, that person is able to assist you and let you know that your investment is a good investment. That's if you are going to buy a house. If you had to, beyond the building itself, most of the time, again, in real practice, you would find that a lot of people sell properties in the dry season, and you buy this thinking you bought the dream house. And then it rains, and then the place floods. And then you're like, wow, I didn't figure this out. People these 2 times and try to see the historical performance of such locations. So even the location you are living at becomes an integral part of selecting what you have to buy. When you come to designing your own building, as in acquiring land, again, the architect is important. He needs to come in to look at whether that place is fit for purpose. And the architect will look at, most likely, if there's a city plan for that area, what the hope is. And I'll give you an example. If you go to buy land in a place where all the buildings are single-level buildings, as in there isn't a story or a floor above, that architect will be able to tell when your aspirations are to build a 4-story building, that this may not be the land to do that on, because when you go into the Surveyor General's drawings, that land cannot be allowed to be used for that. So he's able to direct you. That architect, when you buy the land, is also able to do certain things to find the character of the land and actually tell you that it may be expensive to build here or not, using either geotech surveys, which will tell you the nature of the ground, and to generally help you to make the right decisions in either acquiring that land and then leading into the process of acquiring the building that you're looking for. So yes, from the outset, it's important we are involved from the very beginning, almost at the creative point, the idea, the vision of any person to create a building. An architect must be engaged if success is to be achieved.
I am regretting listening to you, but there's hope, right? I have seen people who have built and then later on got real experts and then they've made changes to the structure. But I am also told that correcting it may be more expensive if you had done it the right way from the beginning.
That is why the initial advice is critical.
So can I ask you, is the way real estate is developed in Ghana, is that the right way?
If you look at it in a silo, when I say in a silo, people decide to buy a piece of land and then develop an estate. And we call it real estate. But all this must fit into some broader plan, and it suits, people to just go on the outskirts of town, find what used to be agric land, and then plant an estate there. But housing is really just part of a triangle. When I say part of a triangle, housing, enterprise, which is what you do for a living, and movement are all together. Okay, so you go and plant an estate 30 kilometers from where you work, it creates problems for you. So you don't generally just think of housing in respect of a place that you accommodate yourself. And then, of course, to maximize probably the piece of land they have, it actually has, a lot more housing than community needs if you want to create a community. So invariably you realize that you are not really in a residential area. It's just a collection of houses, and then your community needs, which normally are promised in the beginning, never happens. So it creates a lot of problems. Of course, when you come into inner urban areas, those community needs are complementary. They are basically within the stance of where you live, and so it's not too critical. When you go on the outskirts of town, what has been put in place, there are a lot of inconveniences, and like you rightly said, too many times the focus is on trying to maximize on it. But you see, architecture is responsive. You've got to respond to something. And so when you're going to put in a property, then you ask yourself, does this respond to anything? And now we're beginning to hear of too many properties on the market that are not moving, and then you ask yourself, what was the beginning consideration in putting things in place, and what cost implications do they have? What social structure are you looking? What is your market range? And there are 1,001 things that go into it. You go and put people on the outskirts of town, and meanwhile they work 30 kilometers away, and you have no consideration as to how.
But if not the outskirts, then where? Because it's choked.
No, it's not choked. You can regenerate the city. You can regenerate the city. A lot of commercial activities commercial properties that have come up in the past 5 years have all been regenerated within the city. Okay, but you see, you can't just think of housing independently, because then it creates problems for everybody else. Okay, one of those problems is on transportation. Okay, because people just get housed because they have some enterprise to attend to. Between the house and the enterprise is transportation. If you don't connect these three, we have a problem.
Let me add quickly to what Actor Kwame has said. It's important to develop within a framework. And the word urban design must come in this discussion because it begins to link urban planners with architects. And I say architects to cover the larger architecture, but really landscape architects as well. Winston Churchill, one of Britain's prime ministers, made a great statement. He said that we shape our communities, and in the end, the communities shape us. And I find that statement to be very profound. The quality of life is based on these discussions we're having. So the foray of urban design, to begin to think holistically about developing the city. Now you asked a question, which is why I sort of made the comment that we have to build outside. We don't have to build outside. You would realize that our city is growing and sprawling in a very haphazard manner. And that's because we don't have a clear plan for the development of the city. Let me explain. In the center of town, people are living on acre properties. They are living on really, the occupation per square meter of land is very small. Whereas in more developed societies, there are more people occupying that square meter of land. All right, so it means that we can densify, we can increase the number of people who lived in the city. So to make it very clear for you, imagine that if we were to say that by design, the whole city of Accra could stretch from maybe the center of Accra being maybe standing at Stadium and stretching out a radius up to maybe Adenta, would you believe it? Imagine, just because we sort of densified properly so that we can use land. It's important. We're in a time of green architecture. We're in a time where we're talking about low resources. The question is, are we appreciative of these low resources? Are we therefore designing with that in mind? And that design comes to urban design, which is bringing the two forces of urban planning and architecture in all its forms together to say, this is what our city will be, to create the kind of public realm. If you have kids, or you take your kids in the morning to school, right now, just where you stay, which is maybe beyond Uyarifa or some other Dodua, some far area, you would have to take your kids to school, come into work. Most likely you work at Joy FM, you drive into town, and then you have to quickly rush back at a certain time to go pick them. It just doesn't make the living right.
But that's our reality today. So
it's a reality because we are not designing. And then it brings the word designing being solving the problem. Because it's a problem we have to solve, and it is possible to solve that problem. But if you compare this to other countries where this has been taken serious, case in point, Denmark, where people can virtually ride anywhere in the city, and it makes for good living, it reduces the carbon emissions, and the quality of life, exercising, you are always healthy.
The country is one of the happiest places.
Absolutely one of the happiest places in the world. So it is possible to make Ghana a heaven, and I think we haven't been able to do that, because we as a collective, and I say collective not because we're only led by the architects alone cannot do anything. Like you said, somebody has to procure that service. These people, together with the architects, have to have the vision to say, what do we create? What do we make Ghana? How do we make our cities in the context of cultural understanding of who we are as a people, economic understandings of what we have as an asset in the country to make Ghana a better place? It is possible to make a better country.
Let me bring you to the family and back to the question I asked. How do you arrive at that decision to buy a plot of land or to buy a house that's already developed?
Okay, I think just continuing then, the question has always been asked left or right, and I don't think it's either of them. I don't think it's either of them. For example, if you have a good real estate developer, and we do have very good real estate developers, as much as we also have bad real estate developers, if you have a very good real estate developer who's created a quality product, which is already there, instead of spending all the time. If they are well located, you've gone with your architects, they've checked, everything is fine.
So number one, always go with your architects.
It's very important.
Okay.
It's very important. I would say that, you know, it's not just the architects. We're a group of allied professionals. I'd like to say just architects because we look at things more holistically. Each of the other members of the team are looking at specifics.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's good to go with your architect to look at the totality of what is being presented. So that when you go and he says, thumbs up, this is a good property to acquire, then you acquire that property because it's ready.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait and keep paying rent, especially when you have the money. So it's a good decision there, but it also becomes a bad decision if you're going to go to buy a property you have no knowledge about. You wouldn't go with the right professionals to make that selection because in the long run, you're going to spend, say, $150,000, $200,000, let's call it $75,000, depending on what property you are buying, only to now start doing repair work, which can't be good for you.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you also decide that you want to build for yourself, it can be a good enterprise. That means I may have the time to create a certain uniqueness for myself, and there too, it is a good thing to create uniqueness. You know, so it's neither. I don't think it's a plus or minus. I don't know what also.
Can we look at the challenges involved doing both, the positives and then the negatives?
You know, I mentioned that architecture is responsive. He's mentioned the fact that you need to have your architect with you. So whatever the situation, whether it's A or B, you pick out the positives. So like you said, if you go to a real estate place and it works well, I wouldn't even stop at the fact that the house that you're looking at is good enough. I would look at post-occupation services. I've seen so many estates that all the houses are sold. The roads, the drainage, the lighting, the landscaping has just gone bad because nobody is responsible and nobody cares. But this is a home. Once you move in, it moves from a house to a home. This is a place where you live your life with your family. Okay, those other issues are important. Okay, then you have a situation where you have a choice as to where you want to live, and like you said, you create the uniqueness because it's responsive to what your aspiration, your family aspirations are. And you're happy to be able to identify with something that initially used to be a concept, but is now a home for the family. So really, it's the advice that you get on every situation.
Okay.
You know, and it is important that that advice precedes. So let's go back to relocating on the outskirts of town. So yes, you may get a cheaper, in quotes, products on the outskirts of town, but it costs you so much, the children especially, to move to town to work. It costs you a little more to have that property in town, okay, but it costs you less to commute.
Today it's not just a little more, it's a whole lot more.
Exactly. So you know, like I mentioned, once everything in the triangle fits, you know, you make those decisions. You know, so then you realize that children are waking up at 4:30 a.m. and commuting because you wanted a cheaper property on the outskirts. But you're staying here and they are waking up at your normal time and still getting to work within 30 minutes for a little bit more.
Exactly.
But that little bit more is an investment you make today.
I think you have to look at what you call the life cycle cost.
Yeah.
So you need to look at, if I bought it today for, say, $20,000, and I look at my life in 10 years, and I can actually value the cost to me at $20,000 out of town, and which could be $100,000. Why not borrow today at $100,000, knowing I will be able to, because I will spend the money.
Yeah.
And pay over a period, which is where mortgages come in. Of course, that is left to the mortgage finance experts, but that's where we need to get creative with our housing finance, and why I said it's important to think at the level of urban design as problem solving, not only in creating the aesthetics, but also looking at the demographics and the finance and the economics that makes it work so that we can afford to stay in the city, because it is possible. It's just we haven't done.
I haven't thought about it the way that you're saying it right now. It makes a lot of
Premium on your convenience.
Exactly.
And that translates into health, recreation, so many other.
Does it make a difference that some of the real estate developers are now promising a school, recreational facilities, there's a police station, you know, assuring security 24/7? Does it matter?
It matters to some extent. But you know, there's a while back I looked at social services within the context of Accra. You look at what we call Class A schools, and they're all concentrated within the center of the city. So it doesn't matter what you provide, and a school's integrity doesn't pop up in 1 year. Okay? So you may have schools in certain communities, and people will still want to traverse, because you can't compare your 1 or 2 year old school to what has been around for 60 years. Okay? And then, so we should be able to have a spread of quality facilities. When that happens, you can begin to buy into that integrity and be sure that I have this. Yes, I have security, I have access to conveniences, I have access to recreation, I have access to education, even to religion. People still move miles to just attend church, okay? So the point he keeps making about urban planning, okay, to improve the quality of life for its inhabitants, is very critical. You know, we've just left everything on autopilot, and you see all the, issues that keep popping up, and people keep complaining on a daily basis because we are not addressing the issues of urban planning. We are not aware of the fact that when we give this city a properly planned layout and it functions well, it's to the benefit of everybody.
And with the architects, as you have it in the institutes, would your colleagues work on a low budget? So I have a bit of money this month, and I can start the projects, continue for a while. I have to go and look for the money, and then we'll continue maybe in the next 6 months. Will the architects work with you on that?
We already do that. We work in a real environment. We already do that. We have clients at every scale. There are clients who have everything today and would move. But the reality is that most people who are even building their homes would take between 2 to 5 years, my experience. And yes, we already work with them, and because we are interested altruistically to ensure that they, because see, that's our calling. It's our interest that you actually get a great place to stay. So we do that. I know the discussion is more going towards the cost of architects. Can you afford an architect? And
you guys appear expensive.
That's
You're very polished.
That's
Perception. It's a perception.
It is a perception.
You know,
I would like to call it that we are not expensive. We are valuable.
Yeah. And you see, costs, you just mentioned the point where it costs you a lot more to repair a property. That cost that you are avoiding by not going to the architect, you spend that cost and probably more in trying to recondition the property to what an architect would have put it in. Okay, and sometimes people start this whole enterprise with cost. That for us is not the issue. The issue is the value that you're getting out of the service. And that value is far more than the cost which you think you're trying to save by not taking advantage. And you see, we like I mentioned, architecture is humanity. Before we started this thing, it's humanity. We think of things in a far more holistic manner than you think. You know, it's not just putting spaces and walls together. You know, there's a lot more philosophy in architecture than probably in any other profession. Okay, there's a lot more consideration on your welfare, and that welfare includes your capacity to even pay for the architect's services. Okay.
Well, when you compare the architect services as part of the whole chain, now, so imagine you're going to have a development cost. That development cost includes the cost of the building, but beyond that, paying for allied professionals, architect and the whole team of designers, paying for lawyers, legal. When you look at that cost, at the time you finish building, when they value the property, if let's say you spent $100,000, from the day the building is finished, the value keeps going north. In 5 years, that property is valued at, say, $150,000, $175,000. The architect's fee may be in there as a percentage of, there are many ways to charge, but it's in there as a percentage of, say, $80,000 you might have spent to do the real building, let's put it that way. When you compare that cost to the value you create over time, you will realize that it's not about expense, it's about value building. Yeah. So just to buttress what, Architect Osei Kwame had.
We're getting to the end of the conversation, but if I did not involve an architect in the very beginning, which in my case, that is what it is it too late to come back to you and say, take a look at my building again for me?
In some cases, no. In some cases, yes. And let me give you the case where it is yes. For example, if the building is full superstructure and you forgot to do, say, damp proof, and damp proof is, as you build, to prevent rising damp from coming into your building, there is a layer of a course that must be put there before you build. This is what's causing a lot of people's buildings to sort of
scale.
Flake on the walls, right? If you haven't done that, it's almost impossible to assist. There are ways to be creative. We found ways to try and overcome that, but that case may be a problem. In a case where you've done some of those things and where maybe the speciality, we were just discussing this before we started, it's not working. An architect still comes in to try and help you to make what I would say good of a bad situation. Okay. So yes, it is possible, but you first have to engage the person to go there and look at it and then maybe give you an advice. Okay. Sometimes it can be painful, but that's the problem when we are not educated about it.
So what if you have drainage issues, which
let me just carry on before, natural lighting, as we're sitting here, costs nothing. If you have a design where you have no natural lighting in some spaces, and you always have to use artificial lighting, that's a continuous cost for as long as you live. To manage that, to achieve natural lighting in that space may be almost impossible or extremely expensive for you, okay? And that is why interventions early help. Okay, now back to the issue of the drainage. We keep talking.
Is it a familiar situation?
It is.
Extremely familiar situation.
It is.
Extremely familiar situation, and there's so many considerations into coming out with even just a 2-bedroom house. So many considerations, which is not obvious to you, okay? And therefore, the advice is always important. But coming back to the issue that you talked about, drainage, I mean, sometimes it's difficult to capture exactly what architecture is because it is everything. And you may think that drainage or the geology or the geography of a place really has nothing to do with your 70 by 100 plots. But that's not the case. Everything in the environment has to do with it. Everything. And that is the kind of consideration that we bring to advising you in exactly what it is that you need to do. And you see, you would realize that you probably may have built in a place where out of 100 plots, when you went, only 5 houses. It is still 100 plots. As all the 100 get built, don't forget that the capacity of that area to hold water reduces because everybody's built. Yeah. And that is when you begin to see rising damp, which you never experienced it 5 years ago when you were building. Okay? That kind of advice, observation, is not available to you. So you use, or probably even in the valley, but as it rains, because nobody's built, the water runs off. Now everybody's built and the water gets stuck. And suddenly, when it rained and your property was dry, suddenly it's flooded. Okay? So it is very critical to emphasize the fact that the initial advice, it's important.
Okay. Now I want you to, and this is in wrapping up, can you tell me some of the projects that you've worked on as architects in Ghana?
That's a tough one because ideally our ethics does not allow us to advertise.
This is not an advertisement. This is just to appreciate where you're coming from.
We've worked on several projects, a lot of industrial projects. We've recently worked on Ogwa Hotel, which was a reconversion of the former Cape Coast Catering Rest House. And we've done several projects for banks, for offices, several residential projects, not just even within our shores in Nigeria, in Senegal, in Cote d'Ivoire, recently in Bamako,
As in Ghanaian architects working elsewhere?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, a lot of Ghanaian architects that work elsewhere, And once you understand the principles of architecture, you're able to handle anything, And for me, one of the most efficient designs I've seen is the bus stop in London. You know, as simple as that. But it's a combination of a lot of intellectual effort. That addresses vandalism, it addresses communication, it addresses maintenance, it addresses a whole lot of things, you know. And that's the kind of expertise that architects bring to anything. So really, a project may be huge and complex, but once you bring an architect's intellect to bear on it, you can be sure that you'll achieve what you expect.
You're a very modest man.
Well, we've ours is a small practice, maybe 11 years in the business, I think, or certainly how many years, 20 something.
Yep.
But it's not about the use of it, it's about what you're able to do. So we've done a myriad of projects from small scale, people's homes. We're even designing the future of the kiosk. The kiosk, which is
as we see it,
which is a manifestation of the rural-urban migration, and we've designed from that scale to homes, to apartments, to office buildings, to shopping malls. Our latest building on the landscape, which we are very proud of, is the EcoBank headquarters building. We worked on the West Hills Mall, just to mention a few of some of the projects that we are working on. But I think for me, the important part of our profession, and which I think also Kwame will agree with, is that if we get it right, if we're able to do it right, by trying to understand the cultural underpinnings, the social underpinnings, the economic underpinnings, the climatic underpinnings that go into trying to make design, we will be able to create the right kind of spaces, the right kind of city. Its benefit is far-reaching. Tourism will become very strong by creating character, and architecture allows you to create character by understanding culture. It's very important that we get it right as a city. If we get it right, it increases the inflows of tourism. It not only does that, but it increases the general well-being of ourselves as a people, and in the end, we are building a better future for our kids and generations.
So where can we find the Institute of Architects, just in case somebody wants to tap into your expertise?
The Institute of Architects is located in Ridge. If you know the Apex Bank, we are adjacent to the Apex Bank. And yeah, it's been there for all these years, and we are available to share expertise with a larger membership of more than 1,000 registered, who will be able to give the right advice to the general public. Yes.
I thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. And even though I have a lot of regrets, I have a lot of hope as well. So thank you. This is just the beginning of our conversation, the home series, and it's all to get you prepared for this year's Habitat Fair 2018. We don't want you regretting later on or making mistakes that you could have avoided. So join the conversation every Friday on the AM show and get ready for the very first clinic, which is happening this Saturday and Sunday at the Achimota Mall. It's from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can bring the entire family as well. Thank you for watching.
Aquaba is the feeling of joy when you know you are home, where you sleep in luxury and comfort, and wake up to the breeze of the Atlantic Ocean. Aquaba to Labadi Beach Hotel, where the food is fresh and the smiles are genuine. Now you know you are home. Ghana's finest 5-star hotel, Labadi Beach Hotel. The legacy lives on.